Who's the worst person to stand up to Donald Trump?
The government has a mandate from the Canadian people to stand up to Donald Trump and the Americans.
The First Minister's agreed on a plan to build this great country. Stand up to Donald Trump. Fact.
Yeah, Mark Carney completely folded to Donald Trump faster than a lawn chair on Canada Day. In a brilliant move of diplomacy and demonstration of strength of Prime Minister Mark Carney. Oh no, wait. That was a political fiction novel I was reading this morning. Yeah, Mark Carney completely folded to Donald Trump faster than a lawn chair on Canada Day. Let's take a look. Breaking this morning, or rather late last night, federal government rescinds digital services tax to advance trade talks with the United States. Federal government says it has decided to rescind a digital services tax that led to U.S. President Donald Trump to break off negotiations aimed at ending the damaging trade war between the United States and Canada. In a late Sunday announcement, Prime Minister Mark Carney's government said talks with the Trump administration would resume now that Canada has repealed the levy, which applied to U.S. tech giants such as Amazon, Google, parent Alphabet, Meta, Uber, and Airbnb. Quote, Prime Minister Carney and President Trump have agreed that parties will resume negotiations with a view towards agreeing on a deal by July 21st, 2025, end quote, the Canadian government said in a statement on Sunday. Now, before I talk about this, we just have to get some context, folks. Just have to get some context. I want to go all the way back to February, during the leaders' debate during the Liberal Party leadership race. And I want to pull that in and let Mark Carney speak for himself.
I think in a situation like this, you need experience in terms of crisis management. You need negotiating skills, but you also need economic expertise, because part of the way to deal with this situation is to do what we should have been doing and what we need to do as a country, which is to build a strong economy. Now, we're going to spend time on building a strong economy, so I'll go through my plan for that later. But let me start by being clear. We will never, ever be part of the United States in any way, shape, or form. We have to recognize that the Donald Trump of today is different than the Donald Trump of several years ago. Then his objective was to take more of our market. Now he wants to take our country. Let me finish by pointing out one other thing. Who's the worst person to stand up to Donald Trump? It's Pierre Poilievre.
Well, let's just take your word for it. He's the worst person to stand up to Donald Trump. At least he would stand up to Donald Trump. By your logic, he may not do a great job, but at least he'd be standing up. You're not standing up at all. You're sitting down. When Donald Trump gets up, you sit down. And that's what happened today. But we're not done, folks, because this wasn't the last time he said it.
What's important is that the government has a mandate from the Canadian people to finish the job of building that Canadian economy, to finish the job of diversifying our trading partners, and to have a strong mandate to stand up to Donald Trump and the Americans and negotiate the best deal for Canadians.
Well, considering we're only, less than 3 months into your mandate, pretty sure you've completely failed that mandate, because you're not standing up to Donald Trump. You literally just said, and that was right before the campaign actually kicked off for the federal election, folks. You just said that the Canadian government needs a strong mandate from the Canadian people in order to stand up to Donald Trump. When's it going to happen, Mark? Because all we've seen is you roll over. You exempted virtually all the tariffs that you said that you hit back the United States with on April 16th. And you've done nothing to stand up to Donald Trump, except say some stuff. And it's like, oh, well, we're not going to sit down with him until he recognizes us as a sovereign country. Well, that didn't happen. So And then there was this digital services tax. And we're going to get there because apparently that wasn't going to come off either. So, but let's fast forward to question period when Mark was all bluster and he was letting everybody know that he was the man.
Mr. Speaker, the First Minister's agreed on a plan to build this great country. Stand up to Donald Trump. Fact. That's right. Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada is imposing tariffs that cause maximum impact on the United States, minimum impact on Canada. Fact. On over $60 billion of U.S. exports to Canada. Fact.
As we said, the other fact that he didn't want to talk about in that question period was he'd actually rescinded all of those in an exemption order. So yeah, technically the tariffs were still there, but that's like saying, you know, well, I have a very strong steel door in my house, but you don't say that the steel door has been left wide open. Doesn't change the fact that people can get in. Doesn't change the fact that these tariffs really aren't doing the job that you're trying to tell the Canadian people that they were. Especially in the middle of the campaign. You didn't want to talk about that one, did you? No. So this is the guy, man. This is the guy who's going to stand up to Donald Trump. I have experience standing up with Donald Trump. Pierre Poilievre's the worst guy to stand up to Donald Trump. You don't want Pierre Poilievre across the table from this guy. Well, Donald Trump kicked you out of the table. He kicked you out of the room. And then you had to come crawling back. And what we said on yesterday's video was that there was actually people trying to tell CTV News and other legacy media that, oh, this is Mark Carney's brilliant negotiation tactic. He's using it as a bartering chip. And what we said yesterday came to pass. Any leverage that you would have had with that digital services tax as a bartering chip, that effectively was flushed down the toilet because now it's actually the requirement to get back to the negotiating table, which is exactly what Mark Carney had to do. So some negotiator that we have up here, folks, but want to talk about something that I don't think a lot of people know, but there was discussions going on at the G7 about this digital services tax and that Carney shouldn't be doing it. Let's take a look at that. So this is from Politico, folks, and this came out a few days ago. The decision came after Canada refused to delay the implementation of the tax for 30 days while the two countries negotiated a trade deal, White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett said Friday afternoon on the Fox Business Network. This is, of course, in response to the termination of the trade talks as a result of the digital services tax. Quote, they're taxing American companies who don't necessarily even have a presence in Canada, end quote, Hassett said, calling the tax, quote, almost criminal, end quote. They're going to have to remove it, he said, and I think they know that. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Trump had previously agreed to secure a new economic and security deal by July 16th, in which Canada was hoping Trump would lift tariffs on the country. Quote, we'll continue to conduct these complex negotiations in the best interest of Canadians, end quote, Carney said to reporters as he left his office Friday after Trump had published the initial post. The Prime Minister's office did not immediately comment on Hassett's claim. I bet they didn't. Trump continues on, quote, we have all the cards. We have every single one. We don't want to do anything bad, but economically we have such power over Canada. I'd rather not use it, end quote, Trump said to reporters Friday in the Oval Office. Quote, most of their business is with us, he added. And when you have that circumstance, you treat people better. Last week, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne said Canada wasn't going to pause the tax despite pressure from Congress, business groups, and industries. Quote, this was voted on by Parliament, so we're going ahead with the DST, end quote, Champagne told reporters. Quote, we had fairly long, extensive discussions at the G7 about the different tax regimes that you find in different parts of the world. The digital services tax is not unique to Canada, by the way, he said. Let's put that into context. This is not the big thing. The big thing is all the other types of taxes you have around the world. So this was talked about at the G7. And they were warned. You better take this off. You better not proceed with this. And Champagne stands up there and says, well, this tax is not going to be taken off. And remember, this is the same champagne that said, we're not going to have a budget this year. We're just going to have a fall economic statement. So this is now twice in a matter of 2 months that Mark Carney has made Francois-Philippe Champagne look to be a complete moron. Because right after Champagne told everybody that there was not going to be a budget, Mark Carney comes out and says, no, that's not correct. We're going to have a budget in the fall. After he got a ton of pressure, you just let Champagne wear the humiliation. And now you have Champagne coming out and saying, we're not going to rescind the DST. And then you have Mark coming out last night saying, we're going to take off the DST. So I remember Champagne specifically saying that I'm going to be partners with Mark. I'm going to be partners and we're going to work together really well. Yeah, some working relationship. Champagne doesn't seem to understand that he's Carney's clown. He's the guy that gets to make all of these pronouncements and then look like the idiot when Mark Carney comes out after and then says all this stuff and corrects him and completely contradicts him. But Mark Carney looks to be wearing a lot of this today because all of this bluster. Oh, I'm standing up for Donald Trump. We have a mandate. You don't want anybody else other than me standing up to Donald Trump. You're literally sitting down. And this is the problem. And you say you have a mandate from Canadians to stand up to Donald Trump. Well, anyone who voted for Mark Carney, are you impressed yet? Or are you depressed? Because you did not get what you were sold. You were sold a bunch of snake oil, and it's not happening. There's one other aspect that I want to bring up. Tanya and I were talking about this earlier today, and this is her observation, and it's actually a really good one. What she pointed out is Mark Carney is used to being in the private sector where all of these other companies that he's been dealing with are competitors. They're not partners, they're competitors. You're trying to one up on them, you're trying to get more money than them. And again, this comes back to my point of he's running this government, or trying to, like a Fortune 500 company, and you can't do that. You're not the CEO of a company. And as Tanya says, you are a world leader, and these other people in these other countries, they're not your competitors. You have to collaborate with them. You need the United States. Like, Mark Carney keeps trying to sign this stuff with Europe. They're not, like, all of them combined, they don't equal the amount of trade that we have with the United States. It's something like $400 billion. It's an insane amount of trade that we do with the United States. And we're in the tens of billions with Europe. And you're just walking away from that. You can't do that. You can't just say, well, we're competing with the United States. No, you have to leverage what you can, but you have to build up the Canadian economy so we are less immune from that. You keep the trade relationships that you have, and then you build more. So this is something that, frankly, Mark Carney needs to get through his head. You are not a CEO as Prime Minister. You're the Prime Minister. Now, before we actually end this video, here's one more piece of good news that people may or may not know. As predicted, Mark Carney actually did something which he told the truth about. He kept his word. So maybe I'll give kudos where kudos are due. Yay, you actually didn't lie about something, Mark Carney. And what was that? Well, today he announced that he is calling the by-election for, yes, ladies and gentlemen, Battle River Crowfoot. Now, we had initially predicted that this was going to be called on either the 5th or the 11th of August, but we were off by about 1 week. He's called it for Monday, August 18th. So, if you're a voter in Battle River Crowfoot, you are heading to the polls on August 18th, and you get to elect a new member of Parliament, which is going to be the official leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre.